carries 3-0. Thank you, Pete. We have a briefing item today, and this is on our proposed fiscal year budget 2022 for Mesa County. And looks like Pete is going to present that as well. And Spencer.
Spencer, come on up. Give us just a moment. We'll load the presentation here and get going.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's right. One second, we'll pull this right up. While we're doing that, I'll talk a little bit about some of the highlights that what our proposed budget is hoping to accomplish, and we'll move from there. But obviously, our proposed budget, with addition of the American Rescue Plan dollars, we've been able to really concentrate on building community, including numerous projects as mentioned previously on the Mesa Water and Sand and the various others, but also in addition to the Clifton campus, as we're referring to that, with some very great components, early childhood education center, a community hall, and hopefully partnering with the library and other components there. So the budget itself also, it puts us in a very good fiscal stability component currently. We're able to take that money and use it aggressively in the community, at the same time continue to have a very strong fiscal component to what we have with the county. So again, it's been tough. Now, that being said, some of the challenges will definitely be trying to get a feel for what our economy is going to do. Anybody that can tell me that, I would be happy to get the Powerball numbers from them also, because that's going to be a very tough component, is to trying to figure it out. So in some senses, we're also being fiscally conservative to make sure that we can handle any curveballs that come at us from the economic sense and our community. So looks like we've got it here. So I'll just step through. As mentioned, building community, expanding access to critical services. The county, of course, as a business, effectively provides services to our community. And our budget is a reflection of those services and how we value those services and push them forward. And of course, building community, the opportunity we currently have with the American Rescue Plan. Investing in county employees, we're able to continue working to move our county employees forward. And HR, our human resources group, did a study of where we're at and has brought forward a budget number to help move some of the folks forward, in particular those folks that are on the lower end that we needed to move into the brackets and move upwards. Promote fiscal stability, as I said. You'll see that we're showing that our fund balance continues to push upward, which is good. At the same time, we do know that we have some on the horizon Tabor issues and various other issues, and including, as I said, just trying to get a feel for what our economy is going to continue to do the following year. We maximize the beneficial use of federal funds. I'll also say other funds. So when we saw that we could put down, for instance, 30 cents and get back $1 for the community, we emphasize that as part of our budget review team. There are addressing key gaps in staffing. We're starting down that road. We've got a lot of work still to do there, I'll be honest with you. But we, based on where we felt we could, we've started to add back in positions and work things. And we know that in particular some of our internal service and other funds took the brunt of cuts previously, and we're working hard to address some of those. Then probably most important, and this great segue, because I'll turn it over to Spencer from here, using data to align resources and priorities. In other words, a performance-based budget that we looked at hard. The budget review team, and I'll speak about them at the end here, but They were excellent. They were excellent at challenging folks and looking through the criteria and making sure that we had a performance-based budget based on criteria that's important for our community and our county. So with that, I'll turn it over to Spencer and let him step through some of the highlights of this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning. So I want to talk just a little bit about some key trends that we're seeing underlying the budget and some of the changes in revenues and expenditures that we're going to talk through in a little bit. The first one, which you know well, is that our sales tax revenues have been continuing to increase throughout this year. In 2021, year to date, our sales tax revenues are up 20% over last year and 22% over the level that we budgeted for this year. And you can see really the very steady pace of growth, not only since about the beginning of 2017 on this chart, but in particular in 2021. So this has bucked many people's expectations, including our own. It's certainly far above our budget picture. The one thing I'll highlight is that it's always nice to celebrate the good times. If you look on the left side of this graph, you see what it looks like in bad times. Sales tax is a very volatile revenue source. It's very sensitive to local economic conditions. And in Mesa County, it's very sensitive also to tourism activity. At the beginning of 2009 through about the beginning of 2011, we saw sales tax drop almost 30%, and it didn't get back to its 2008 peak until about 2019. So we budget very conservatively when it comes to sales tax, even when we're experiencing the rapid growth that we've seen over the last 2 years. Another really important trend that we're seeing is the heating up of our local housing market. Again, this isn't really news to anyone in Mesa County. The significance of this, however, is that Grand Junction's housing market is one of the hottest in the state, and in fact, outpacing both the state and the nation as a whole. This shows the change in a key housing price index since May of 2019, the blue bar, and May of 2020, the gold bar. Really what we're seeing here is a significant increase in the assessed values of our properties, which means an increase in property tax revenues. But there's a lot of other activity that comes along with a hot housing market, including residential and commercial construction, and that's really led significant uptick in our building permit revenue over the last couple of years as well. It's tough to say how long this will last, of course. Property taxes are a little bit more stable as a revenue source than sales taxes, but this is a really significant factor in our budget. And of course, property taxes go not only to our county general fund, but also to our Department of Human Services. They fund road and bridge repair, and they go to some other organizations around the county as well. And of course, we have improvement districts that are benefiting from property tax growth as well. So here's an overview of the proposed budget for fiscal year 22, and I've divided it into general fund at the top of the table and all of our county funds, including our solid waste enterprise fund at the bottom there. I'll highlight just a couple of things. Number one, as Pete just mentioned, it's really important in this budget to continue to maintain the fiscal stability that we've been able to build over the last couple of years in the county. And the 2022 budget is really designed to do that. You see about a 4.5% increase in general fund revenues and a slightly lower 4.4% increase in general fund expenditures when you compare to the adopted budget for 2021. In terms of all funds, you see some really significant changes, and I want to talk about what's going on there. But just top line, almost a $50 million increase in total county revenues. That's about a 27% rate of growth year over year. Expenditures at just a little bit less, about 23% or $45 million. The biggest chunk of this, a little over 2/3 of it, is actually our American Rescue Plan dollars. And not only are we using approximately $17 million from the American Rescue Plan in 2022 in the proposed budget, but it's important to note that those funds are actually double counted. because on both the revenue and the expenditure side, because we first recognize the revenue that we receive from the federal government, but then that money goes from our economic development fund, where we deposited those federal funds, to the capital fund, where we're going to make the actual expenditure. So we show a revenue of $17 million on our books twice. That's how we have to account for it. But that effectively means that if you were to take a big chunk out of that revenue growth, you'd see a much lower number, both in absolute and percentage terms. Same thing on the expenditure side. When we transfer money out of a fund, that's an expenditure. And then when we actually expend those dollars, that's an expenditure on our books as well. So I just wanted to highlight there is some double counting going on there. And that's why you see kind of an eye-popping couple of numbers there for all funds. In terms of FTE, Pete mentioned that we are looking at addressing some key gaps in staffing, particularly in our internal services departments like IT, facilities. There are also some grant-funded positions in the district attorney's office related to domestic violence, a couple of positions in the sheriff's office, 2 FTE in the coroner's office, which has really seen a dramatic increase in workload over the last couple of years. Just 4 staff there doing a really, really difficult job. So 22 new FTE, that's only about a 2.4% change, but I'm happy to certainly go line by line and talk a little bit more about what's included in those 22 FTE and why we think those are justified. And then lastly on this slide, our base mill levy. We'll see no change in the base mill levy. We do anticipate that there'll be a temporary tax credit applied to this, probably a little bit less than we've seen in previous years because of some of the growth we've seen in assessed value. But Tabor continues, of course, to restrict how much property tax revenue we can collect. There's a lot of information on this slide, so I'll try and go slow, but I'm really just going to highlight a couple of key things. So we just looked at the top line numbers for both the general fund as well as for the entire set of county funds. This gives you just a little bit more detail about where the money comes from and what we use it for at a high level. So starting on the left side, you have your sources and uses of funds for the general fund. Obviously, the biggest chunk of general fund comes from property tax at just above $21 million in estimated revenue for 2022. Sales and use tax after that is the next biggest piece. So we talked about some of the economic factors underlying the growth in those sources. Certainly in the 2022 budget, just as really in every annual budget for the county, we really count on those 2 sources of revenue to come through because they make up more than 50% of the money that we bring in as a county. That big gray chunk on the top left there is intergovernmental. Those are state and federal grants that our various departments receive. And so those are revenues that, of course, we don't have a lot of flexibility with. They're very important, but they also come with requirements, with reporting expectations, and with restrictions on how those funds can be used. The remaining chunk of sources there you can see is just a little bit less than 25% of the general fund. It's fees, charges for various services, things like building permit revenues, and so on. So that's where we get general fund revenue from, or where we expect to continue to get it from in the 2022 budget. How do we expect to use it? And you can see with that very large light green chunk on the bottom left there that by far the biggest use of general fund is personnel. We employ about 1,100 full-time employees, more than that if you do a total head count of our employees. And so even before the proposed growth in staffing this year, certainly personnel is by far the largest expenditure out of our general fund, followed by operating. And various relatively small uses of funds after that. On the right side, you see all of our county funds combined, and that includes general fund, it includes our solid waste enterprise fund, it includes the capital fund, just to name a few. And you can see that the mix is quite a bit different there. In terms of sources, it goes from property and sales tax revenue to actually being state and federal grants is the largest source of revenue. Plurality, not a majority, but about $79 million in state and federal resources that flows to the county. Obviously a really, really vital source of our operating revenue. Sales and use tax after that includes both the general and capital fund shares of the county 2% sales tax, as well as the public safety sales tax. And you can see that charges for services, which is primarily our internal services that get charged out to our county departments, so really internal county transactions, is the bulk of that charges for services. That comprises a lot of the county budget as well, and that's departments paying for vehicles to be maintained down at the fleet shop, paying for IT services, paying for mail services, paying for insurance costs, and so on and so forth. I'll just move on to uses in the interest of time. Again, personnel is the biggest one, but the biggest difference between our total fund picture and the general fund alone is that capital, of course, enters the picture and is just under a quarter of the county's total expenditures. So that comprises really our capital improvement plan, as well as some smaller expenses out of the solid waste fund. Pete mentioned that fiscal stability is a really important part of this budget, and it's something that the county is been doing a really good job of for the last couple of years. You can see for a number of years our unassigned general fund balance, that is the monies sitting in our general fund that could be used in an unrestricted manner, they remained relatively flat. And of course there were some years there where we did not see a lot of revenue growth and some tough times. But in the last couple of years, since we have started to see really significant revenue growth, the county has done an excellent job of not only growing its operations to meet the needs of county residents and businesses, but also setting aside funds in the event that we see another large drop in revenues, like the sales tax and property tax drops that we saw at the beginning of the last decade. Our unassigned balance right now is about $23 million. I should say that's the beginning balance for this fiscal year. That's about 32% of expenditures. So that's a pretty healthy amount. That means that we've got about 4 months of general fund expenditures sitting in our fund balance. That gives us a little bit of cushion should we encounter a significant unexpected drop in revenue, should we encounter an unexpected expense, etc. Just a little bit of high-level information on our proposed capital improvement plan. This is one of the pieces that I think, as the board well knows, still comes together over the next month and a half as we monitor our current CIP and where we're at in making progress, completing projects, and where our fund balance is at. But just a quick graphic to show revenues and expenditures. With your kind of traditional change in fund balance line there at the bottom of this slide. But obviously there are two sources of revenue here that are the most significant. Sales tax, of course, half of the county 2% sales tax goes into the capital fund. That's clearly a key reason why the county is able to continue to maintain a really healthy capital improvement plan. The American Rescue Plan going to a number of projects. Pete mentioned the Clifton campus. Of course, the board just a couple of weeks ago authorized some expenditures for the Max Sewer plant, for our stormwater capital plan. Those are things that we expect to continue to put some American Rescue Plan dollars towards. And we're also continuing to look at where there are opportunities to really get the most use out of those funds. On the expenditure side, the biggest reason why facilities takes up the lion's share is because of that Clifton campus project getting underway. That makes up the vast majority of that $32 million in slated expenditures for facilities. Public Works at about $15 million. Again, that's a number that could change in the next couple of months. but that's our traditional kind of infrastructure road and bridge maintenance program. Below that, a variety of relatively smaller but still very important uses of funds in the capital plan. Everything from information technology, hardware and software for the county, to fleet, vehicle replacement, debt service on the county's certificates of participation, RTPO bus purchases, and economic development grants that we make to organizations out in the community. You do see here one last thing that I want to highlight. Our proposed appropriation exceeds revenue. There is a change in fund balance of about negative $2.9 million. We do have the fund balance to absorb that. That still leaves us with about $4 million. And, that has to do with really a number of really important projects sort of coinciding in terms of time. And so, based on what we're seeing right now, that definitely looks manageable.
In addition, I'll just add to that, it is our goal to get those capital dollars out into the community as quick as possible. Sure. So this is not a fund that we're looking to keep much of a fund balance in. Same time, we have a lot of projects coming up, so having a little bit of a fund balance so we can absorb any increases or such is what we kind of strive for when we put this budget forward.
Hey, Spencer, back on facilities.
Yeah.
It got a little loud and I got a little distracted. But the facilities, is that just maintenance or what is that?
No, the lion's share of that is the beginning of the Clifton campus project.
So that's about half of it. Is there more infrastructure projects in there, or?
Yeah, I could add to that the community halls. So our facilities group and other our Justice Center projects, all those various projects, including some purchases of property, those will probably occur mostly this year, some next year. So these are what we think about as our infrastructure projects that are in a building or land purchase sense. Okay. And you can see we are shifting and putting quite a bit because most of our rescue plan dollars
are going to be those
based on the categories that we're allowed to use it for are headed in that direction.
Okay,
it also includes the Justice Center work we're doing there, right?
Yes.
And with Clifton, the total budget is $22 million. We're putting in $16 million. The rest is coming from grants, but you're still showing it as an expenditure, right? Even though it's not all county dollars.
We're also anticipating the grant revenue.
Right. Yeah.
And that revenue is included. So that orange bar at the bottom of revenues includes some of those grants that we expect to receive, other than American Rescue Plan dollars.
Thank you.
So I just want to highlight a couple of budget risks and some things that we'll be monitoring really closely in the next couple of months and of course, throughout the rest of the next fiscal year. The first is that there's still a lot of uncertainty about where the economy is at, frankly, let alone where it's going. Certainly the risk or the possibility of a resurgence in COVID, if that were to threaten kind of the broader economic recovery in the state or the country, could have some effect on us. I think probably of more concern in Mesa County would be something like inflation. Right now, inflation doesn't seem to have slowed down our revenue growth. Folks are still spending money in the community. We're still getting folks visiting Mesa County, and that means that our sales tax has remained at the level that you saw on one of the earlier slides. But if inflation continues to rise, obviously we see both expenditure pressures as well as the potential for that to limit how much money people spend in the community and the spending choices that they do make. And so that could become a real threat to our 2022 budget, and it's something that we'll continue to monitor. The only other thing that I'll note in terms of economic factors is it's a little hard to make heads or tails out of the remarkable growth that we've seen through a period of time when, a year ago at this time, we were still kind of bracing for impact in terms of how COVID would affect local government finances. Obviously, we're not experiencing the worst case scenarios that we imagined at that time. But it's not entirely clear whether that's because of the massive federal stimulus over the last couple of months. It's not clear what people are going to do with the large amount of savings that they've accrued over the last 2 years. Our savings rate nationally is at one of the highest levels we've seen in 4 decades. So there are a lot of unknowns about what's going to happen next, and why did we just go through this period of really rapid and unexpected revenue growth. And I think we're going to learn a lot in the next couple of months, but that's something that we absolutely have to monitor because our revenue sources are so sensitive to economic conditions.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes.
So really what I find fascinating is the supply chain problem. And I heard a report yesterday that the biggest sales part of the year, of course, are the holidays, but that the goods and products for the holidays are sitting off these ports, and that they're expecting a dramatic drop in sales over the holidays. Number one. Number two, on the same site, I looked through and saw the number of businesses that are closing or late in paying their landlords. Starbucks is delaying payments to their landlords for lease. Bed Bath & Beyond is going into. So you take a look at that, and there are a lot of those in our community. Now that's not because of the supply chain. A lot of that's just because the COVID combined with the internet sales. And the internet sales are going to have, now theoretically that should be kind of a wash for us because we should be collecting the same taxes with those businesses. But what it doesn't help us offset, even though they pay those taxes, are the people's jobs. Now right now we're short of finding people for those jobs, and that's another factor. But if you just go by the car dealers out there, it was boom days for them about 3 months ago. But now all of a sudden they're out of inventory, and they're going to be out of inventory as demonstrated by our own order last week of some Tahoes and Expeditions. Expect them in 2023, or at least a portion of them. So those are other factors on top of the COVID. So I think this conservative approach is the appropriate approach to take, because it isn't just one missile on the radar. We have several incoming missiles on the radar. Some are bigger than the others, some are closer than the others. And some of the bigger ones are further back, but if they do hit, it's going to have pretty dramatic. So I just wanted to add in there some other factors that you don't even think about, like the Port of Los Angeles or some of these others. They're out there. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Comment, Darren.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McGinnis. You're right. There's a lot right below the surface, and we just don't know what direction that's heading, and that's exactly why we've tried to take a conservative approach in forecasting our revenues, but also in managing our costs. Speaking of those costs, one of the bigger kind of internal risks for us is just the rising cost of insurance and legal services that are related to things like insurance claims. We expect to see about a 25% increase in our general liability premiums this year, but we're seeing increases in a variety of different kinds of insurance products. Law enforcement liability insurance is one area where we've seen increased costs. And at the same time as we're paying more for insurance, we're in many cases also actually increasing our exposure because insurance companies aren't offering as comprehensive a coverage for the costs that they once did. So this is a real challenge. Insurance costs, if you were to look at the total county budget, don't seem particularly significant. But when you think about how much our revenue grows, particularly in the general fund, we're expecting about 4.5% revenue growth. That equates to, in the last couple of years, $3 to $4.5 million. So a $500,000 increase in the cost of general liability insurance takes a significant chunk of that growth away that we might otherwise want to put towards, meeting other needs in the community. And so those insurance costs are something to watch. Even though they seem like a small piece of the budget, they've really exploded over the last couple of years, and it's really a concern that we're keeping our eye on. Third, this is probably one that you hear in a lot of budget presentations, but boy, in the last couple of years, it's been as true as ever. Just the increasing level of regulation and unfunded mandates, new legislation coming down, particularly from the state level, but state and federal both. Unfunded mandates, and those are things that the county picks up the tab to do the work that we're required to do by the state or federal government. Last year, the requirement that sheriff's deputies, use body-worn cameras was a really good example of that. we're seeing more legislation around law enforcement, elections, regulation of, environmental regulation. So there are examples in a lot of different areas where our departments are finding that they're required to do more than they were before, but we're not receiving the revenue from the state and federal government to perform those activities.
If I might, Madam Chair. So when does the sick leave, paid sick leave, and paid family leave, does that kick in next year, or is that the following year?
So in 2023.
Wait just a second. And what's the impact, or what chunk are we going to have to pay versus the unfunded mandate?
So that law begins to take effect in 2023. As of January 1, 2023, employers would be required to start making the payments into the state social insurance system, the premiums. Local governments have the option to opt out of that program. So I don't think at this point we know exactly what our next course of action is, but we do have the option to opt out. I'll note our employees could still opt in on their own and make the employee share of the premium payment to the state. Now, how that's going to work, what it looks like in practice, I don't know. I don't think we've received a lot of information from the state about what that system will look like. But 2023 is when that law will get started.
All right, thank you.
And if I could add to that, what it really impacts is our local businesses. And as mentioned before, it's another missile on the radar that we've got to watch out, a new mandate that they have to comply with at cost. And also, if I could just add on unfunded state and federal mandates, it's not only the fiscal piece, it's the component of having to shift resources on people to evaluate and look at that takes them away from other work that we feel would be more productive in the community or thing, because we do have.
You probably should grab the mic. Just so people
I'm
can
sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, what I was saying is it's also on the unfunded state and federal mandates. It's shifting of our resources, our people's time and energy and effort to look at these. And in many cases, they're very ambiguous, and we have to figure out what that means for us and spend a lot of time and or reach out to our professional organizations and others trying to figure this out. So it's really twofold in the sense of both fiscal and the resources we have to put to try to analyze it and figure out what's going on there. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, the last thing I want to note on this slide as a risk, which really I think could be looked at as both a threat and an opportunity, is just changing business models. What I mean by this is not only has COVID, I think, disrupted the way that a lot of business gets done and created new opportunities, but also challenges as folks look for more services online, for instance. But we're also just seeing change, certainly in the Mesa County community. One example of how this risk plays out in our budget is the new landfill on S Road. We know that that's going to take some of the revenue away from our solid waste fund. And of course, that's an enterprise fund. It's designed to operate as a business and be self-sufficient. And so it's going to require some adaptation to continue to maintain that fund, to continue to maintain the really vital services that the landfill provides. And so I think in a lot of different areas, we're going to start to see through the budget process and in our budget the impact of departments and really, the community kind of rethinking, how do we get this done? How do we provide this important service? How do we maintain our relevance? How do we maintain our ability to continue meeting community needs? And that's something to monitor, I think, probably not just next year, but for the next several years. And again, probably some opportunities there for the county to think about how do we streamline, how do we better meet people where they're at, and how do we become more efficient in the process.
If I might add, Madam Chair, also in this article talks about the car dealerships, that landscape's going to change completely. And it's really been led by Tesla. So Tesla doesn't have local dealerships. They don't have local shops that you fix your car. They come to your electric car. Now that has a lot less working parts than a gasoline motor. But it's really interesting in CarMax in Denver and what the new thing, you'll be ordering a car over internet instead of them having large inventories. And then you'll just go to a local location, kind of a regional location, to pick up your car. And This article is fascinating, but it's happening today, and Tesla's the first one out there to drive that new business model. The reason I bring that up is, we have a lot of economic benefit from those large inventories and things like that. So it's going to be a big change and more nationalized. It's the same thing we're seeing right now in Junction. All our convenience stores, they're not only being bought up by Maverick, which is Flying J, but the guy in Fruita the other day told me another big chain's bought their store down there in Fruita by the Dinosaur Museum. But that's going around, so they're making so that model's going to change too. Just a lot of dynamics.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anything else?
Well, we got quiet all of a sudden.
A little bit on budget process. How do we get from here to there? There being the board adopting a budget, which is slated for December 13th of this year. So here we are presenting the proposed budget. Questions and comments from the public, welcome. The budget document will be available later today online, and folks can go and dig in and find out a lot more detail than you saw in these slides today, certainly. Over the next month to 6 weeks is an opportunity for departments and elected officials to appeal decisions that were made in creating the proposed budget. And then in November, we really get to work finalizing numbers. There are a handful of things that are still outstanding. One of the biggest one is we still don't have final numbers around insurance, and of course the CIP will come together as well, and we'll take any final direction and decision from the board before we bring a budget for you to adopt in December.
Okay.
If I might, Madam Chair, before you conclude your remarks, would you this is for the benefit of the public, obviously, we know the detail of it, but would you explain the process, how you put a team together, who our budget team is, and what different departments, because that really has worked out to be a fantastic model. So if you wouldn't mind, just for the public's benefit.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, perfect segue. I was just about to step in. So we initiated a couple years ago a budget review team, and we've continued to expand it. So this year we had representatives from our HR department, our internal services, facilities, IT, and et cetera, our sheriff's office, our Department of Human Services, our health department, our public works department, and our general overall finance, including Spencer and Pam. So I would like to mention specifically the folks, but first I'll talk about the model, then mention those folks that deserve a lot of recognition for helping this out. So that model brings together, a county by nature is broken into various divisions and elected components. It brings all those folks together so they get to hear the overall concept of the county budget and brings them in as a team, but they're also very much challenging each other and the request and other components. And we brought folks in on their request and asked them to look at various models and ways to do business. So this is what we call our budget review team. The departments mentioned are responsible for our lion's share of the county budget expenses that we have out there. Basically, by having this team, and it's now come together very good in its third year as a team that understands and fully moves and processes and works very, very well. They all made suggestions based on the requests. We would come together, we would look at those. We would look at those suggestions to see where we had people in commonality in those suggestions and where we didn't. And then we asked some very hard questions of some of the departments and groups that were making requests. I think the final number was about 48 FTEs requested, or 46 to 48. And as you can see, we're recommending about 22 in the general fund, and some of those are grant funded and various other components. So this team has been an amazing team that represents most of the departments or divisions in the county, and goes through with the concept knowing exactly most of these folks are finance related people, so they understand directly about what it means for balanced revenue and expenses. And that's some other thing I'd like to mention. I always like to mention during this presentation. County is a local government adopts a balanced budget every year. In other words, we do not put expenses on our grandkids and kids as other governments do. So I'm very proud of that fact, and I'm glad as a county we do that. We live within our means, and we look hard to do that. And we, by law, we have to do that. But I'm also very proud that we do that. It's something that does that obviously makes challenges because we just don't have the printing press for money and just don't print money out for needs and such. But back to the budget review team, it's been a great model. It's worked great. We continue to expand it each year. This year we added a couple more folks from HR and the health department. Of course, with COVID and the outbreak, we thought it was important that the health department be there with their folks too. I'd like to mention in particular Spencer, who of course is our budget manager and led the team. Justin Davis from the Sheriff's Office. Barb Golden from Department of Human Services, Pat Steinkirchner from our Health Department, Brenda Moore, our HR Director. As mentioned by Commissioner McGinnis, there's a number of HR changes going on that we need to continue to watch. Gene Davis from our Internal Services Group, Connie Hahn from our Public Works Group, and Pam Noonan from our Finance Department, our Finance Director. It's been a great model, great team. I'll be honest with you. I don't know how my predecessors did it without seeking that input, because it's very, very important that we reach out and communicate with those folks that are expected to provide those services to the community. So I hope that answers your question, but that's what we've done.
I'm trying to figure out the FTEs. There's a document you sent us previously. It wasn't included in this packet today that shows the requests, I believe, the 42.5. But I'm not clear on which ones you're recommending.
Actually, I have a slide where I can
Okay.
show you that. So this shows you the department, the source of funds, as well as the position. So you can see there.
And these are the ones you're recommending?
These are the recommended, yes.
So the coroner, are recommending both of his?
I am recommending both
okay.
of those.
Okay, I'll have to compare. Can you send that to me so I can compare that to the requests? Unless
Absolutely.
you have a document that does that already. I had just a couple of questions. The clerk's budget in administration went up from $189,000 in 2020 to $441,000 in 2022. I know we did some new FTEs, but I think that's a little bit more than that. Do you know can you tell me what's driving that increase?
So one of the things in the clerk's budget that I noticed this year is there's just been some shifting between the cost centers, or in layman's terms, kind of the divisions. So of course the clerk and recorder is responsible for elections, for motor vehicles, for recording, and for providing the clerk to the board. And then there's an administrative cost center as well. I think some of the FTE have shifted, particularly from recording to administration. That's one of the reasons why we see an increase there. One of the other things that is increasing, of course, is in line with what Pete mentioned, the compensation plan. And the biggest expense in every department, but this is certainly true in the clerk and recorder, is personnel. So salaries and benefits for their FTE are one of the big drivers there.
Okay, and then economic development, we've got about $1.5 million. I don't see any details to that. Where are those dollars going?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The $1.5 million is actually pass-through revenue. It's part of the community development block grant funds that we receive from the federal government, and we pass those through to the Grand Junction Housing Authority.
That's entirely what the economic development line item is?
So the only other portion of the economic development line item in the general fund are some grants that we make to the Western Colorado Business Development Center, as well as to one of our other business partners. It's either the Chamber of Commerce,
CMU,
or GJEP.
Are
The
funds?
CMU economic development money comes out of the capital fund.
Oh,
So you'll
okay,
see
that's
economic
right.
development coming
Yeah.
out of two places: general fund, that's what I just described, and then the capital fund has some funds in there. Primarily
So it
for
just shows that
CMU.
the grants, and it is the grant line item I was looking at, went from $707,000 in 2020 to $1.5 million, it looks like, this year. So what are the details of that jump? Like, what's the?
Yeah, I would actually need to check on
Okay.
that and get back with you. I believe we may just have under budgeted that. But let me check and
It does
get you
look
an
like
answer.
it was budgeted at 707, but the actuals was, I think, 1.6.
And that revenue source, as I understand it,
120.
is pretty consistent year to year, or at least it has been recently.
Okay.
So that's why I think we may just have missed something in budgeting last year.
Okay. And then last question is DHS. I noticed an increase of 2.6 million, but it also appears to have an equal amount of increase in the revenue. So I'm assuming this is all federal and state funding.
Yeah, that's right. So DHS, you're going to see revenues and expenditures match in the budget. And that's kind of a product of their funding sources and the requirements in terms of county match for those sources. So their money is primarily state and federal. They receive a portion of the county's mill levy. That's going up this year, just in line with the overall increase in property tax revenue. You'll actually see their general fund transfer, which along with that mill levy revenue constitutes the county share of DHS budget, has gone down a little bit. And there's a couple of different components of that, but a big part of that is because they're receiving more mill levy revenue, there is just less need for that, for those to come out of general fund.
Yeah. Okay. Those were the only questions I had. Did you have any questions? The budget? Any other questions?
No, but in the future, what I'd like to see is, especially on a recommended FTE, kind of the salary ranges. For example, when I look at the position of family coach, I don't know what that means, but what's a family coach make? Obviously, we've made a dramatic jump, it appears, on adding personnel. By far, the largest group's human services, and within that bracket is child support services. And same thing as you go up and down that. I just kind of like to see how we are comparing kind of salary ranges.
Yeah. And we did have a briefing on especially the child support ones, but for all of the human services ones, I think we pay 13% of the child support specialists and the rest is federally funded. And the workforce center ones, I believe, are 100% funded. But it would be nice to have a chart that shows the requested numbers, the recommended numbers, and the source of funding, because I know more than half of these are funded with non-county dollars of all of the FTEs. So, and I see DHS has been here for the whole meeting. Did you want to come up and add anything or not?
Before we get there, though,
Okay.
so I certainly understand that. But in the past, the director in the past used to say, hey, you know, because it's federally funded, you shouldn't be concerned about what we're paying an investigator.
Oh,
for
the salary,
services.
of course.
And I'm saying, now wait a minute.
Right.
It upends the whole
Has
system.
to be fair.
And so those are the kind of discussions that
Yeah.
we have to have. We're very fortunate that the federal government pays for most of that, but it can throw the whole system ajar.
Absolutely.
As far as morale and everything else. Say, hey, look at what they're getting paid. Look what they. So
Yeah.
that was the purpose of the question.
Yep, sure. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll follow up with a little bit more detail on the FTE.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience have any comments or questions on the budget briefing? Okay. Seeing none, we're not done yet, though. We're going
I guess I have one more comment,
Yes.
Madam Chair, and obviously my two colleagues agree with this, but that budget team's been fantastic. Having been here, of course, you were here preceding me, but during that period of time, boy, I wish whoever thought it up would have thought it up a lot earlier. The rest of us weren't bright enough to figure it out. But at any rate, it's been a big advantage. It really gets the whole team involved in it through their representatives, and I think it's been really effective. So send our appreciation on to that team as well. And we still have a long ways to go, but it's been great. And Pete, thank you very much for pushing that forward when you took over as manager.
Well, I can't echo that strongly enough. As a new budget manager coming in just before we start the cycle of developing our annual budget, I can't thank that team enough because their expertise really helped me become better at evaluating requests, at understanding departments and where they're at, and how we can address some needs in the community. So it was an incredibly valuable process.
And where it's helped a lot is we as commissioners in the past, prior to the service of my two colleagues, is we were making those kind of putting our opinions in. We didn't know what we were talking about. I mean, we didn't know these different things. So that introduced a real high level of expertise versus the three commissioners. And I'm not being critical of the way the board members themselves. It's just that we didn't have the expertise. Now we have it in-house anyway. Enough said. Good job. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, we are going to adjourn as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the Mesa Community Center Public Improvement District with one item on our agenda for this board, and that is a briefing on the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget for the Mesa Community Center PID.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So these will go relatively quick, I think. So first up is the Mesa Community Center Public Improvement District. This is for the Mesa Community Club, Inc. that operates the community center up in Mesa. Revenues for 2022 are estimated at $51,000. That's entirely from the 1 mil that they levy in that district. 2022 expenditures include $91,730 for operating expenditures, $5,500 for personnel, and $14,000 for other expenditures. And again, there's a 1 mil levy. That's where the property tax revenues come from. Not anticipating any changes in that mill levy.
So
happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, this was one of the PIDs that I had the most questions on. It's showing $51,000, as you said, in revenue, $111,000 is expenditures. With most of that, it sounds like operations. How is this sustainable if they bring in the same amount every year and spend the same?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is one of a couple of areas where traditionally, in fact, quite consistently, actuals come in very different than budget, much better, in fact. So we budget for a number of expenditures, but the Mesa Community Club also brings funds to the table. That budget is entirely separate from the Public Improvement District itself. But the community club is doing a lot of work and paying for a lot of the upkeep and operations of the community center. So we very rarely expend the full budget. In fact, last year we saw an increase in fund balance, even though we had budgeted very similarly for what seemed like a pretty significant drop in fund balance.
So you're saying they're not likely to spend the full amount and that they bring in other revenues outside of this?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a complicated budget picture because of that, because there's sort of a second budget that for the county's purposes, for the PID's purposes, are off the books. But because of that, that's how the community center is able to be sustainable.
And on that particular community center, and maybe the others as well, is we have a very involved community, and they do a lot of volunteer services that otherwise we would be paying for to have done. And so I think we have to be prepared to step in case that volunteer effort begins to be reduced for some reason. But right now, it's a big benefit, and it's great because they take ownership as what you're doing with your community thing out in Clifton. I mean, our campus out there. There's going to be a lot of community buy-in, which is a great benefit for our budget.
So what was the actual revenue last year, or for 2021? What do you see as the actual revenue and expenditures?
I don't have those numbers on hand, Madam Chair.
You're talking about the off-book one, too?
Follow up with those.
Well, yeah, just because he's saying that historically we end up bringing in more than we project and we spend less. I just wanted to know what we did last year. But you can share that with me later if you don't have it now. Did you have any questions about this one? Okay. Does anyone in the audience have any comments or questions on this briefing item? Seeing none, we will adjourn as the Mesa Community Center Public Improvement District and convene as the Upper Grand Valley Pest District. And we're going to hear a briefing on the 2022 proposed budget for the Upper Grand Valley Pest District.
Okay, so this is our mosquito district, covers a portion essentially of the Redlands. Very small improvement district. Revenues for 2022 estimated at $20,436. That is property tax as well as a specific ownership tax. 2022 expenditures estimated at $11,175 for operating and $2,500 in other expenditures. No change expected to the mill here.
Okay. Any questions on this item? Anyone in the audience have any questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will adjourn as the Upper Grand Valley Pest District and convene as the Mesa County Lower Valley Public Improvement District and hear a briefing on the 22 budget for the Mesa County Lower Valley PID.
Okay. So the Mesa County Lower Valley Public Improvement District, this is for the MAC sewer system. So 2022 revenues are estimated at $54,268. That's primarily coming from charges, sewer fees. 2022 expenditures at about $25,610. That's entirely in their operating budget there. No mill levy, no property taxes here.
So there's fees on the revenues?
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you know how many people are on that system?
I believe, and I can get to the actual, but it's around 180 taps that are in that district.
Okay. Any questions?
So how do they have expenditures? Do they have anybody on staff?
I can answer that. We share a person across the districts, so part of that person's funding comes from that district, and they spend part of their time there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any questions?
Now, that's active taps. That's not capacity. We have significant unused capacity.
Not in this one. This is the MAC district.
But we will when we do our sewer uplift.
Yes, when we do the upgrade. That's why we're doing the upgrade.
Whitewater, I know that's not it yet, but we have lots of unused capacity.
Correct. Whitewater and Gateway, we just upgraded also. Both those have capacity. MAC does not currently, but we have a plan to get that rectified.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Anyone in the audience, did I ask that yet? Have any questions or comments on this briefing item? Seeing none, we will adjourn as the Mesa County Lower Valley Public Improvement District and convene as the Mesa County Whitewater Public Improvement District.
Okay. So the Mesa County Whitewater Public Improvement District. This is related to the Whitewater sewer system. 2022 revenues estimated at $72,980. About $45,000, shouldn't say exactly $45,000 of that consists of transfer into the fund from the general fund of the county. They receive about $27,780 in sewer fees, charges for services, as well as $200 in other revenues, which is interest on their deposits. And the expenditures are estimated at $355,479, and that's capital expenditures related to that sewer system.
Any questions?
Why do they have such a large fund balance?
That is reflective of the value of their physical assets. So that's why it's so much larger than the other improvement districts.
So those aren't cash fund?
That's correct.
Did you have any questions on this item? Anyone in the audience have any questions on this item? Okay. We will then adjourn as the Mesa County Whitewater Public Improvement District and convene as the Mesa County Whitewater Urban Services Public Improvement District.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Whitewater Urban Services Public Improvement District, this is not necessarily related to their sewer. This is a public improvement district that collects both property and sales taxes in the Whitewater area. Revenues for 2022 estimated at a total of $10,050, $1,800 coming from property taxes, $250 from specific ownership taxes, and $8,000 in estimated sales taxes. 2022 expenditures include just $250 for operating expenditures. This public improvement district doesn't do a lot of sort of ongoing service provision. It was created with the idea that that is a growth area in Mesa County, may require urban services, but right now there's not a significant service component to this public improvement district. No anticipated changes to the current mill levy of 4 mills.
Okay. Any questions? Anyone in the audience have any comments or questions? Seeing none, we will adjourn as the Mesa County Whitewater Urban Services Public Improvement District and convene as the Southwest Mesa County Rural Services Public Improvement District for a briefing on the 2022 budget.
So the Mesa County Southwest Rural Service Public Improvement District. This is related to the Gateway area. 2022 revenues estimated at $104,583 for the sewer fund component of the public improvement district. And that comes from about $61,500 in sewer fees, as well as $43,000 transferred in to that fund that comes out of the Gateway Public Improvement District that we'll talk about next. The operating fund for this district has estimated revenues for 2022 of $1,150, and that comes from property taxes and specific ownership taxes. Again, no anticipated changes to the current mill rate of 4 mills. The expenditures in the sewer fund of $192,928, that is for operating that sewer system. No budgeted expenditures in the operating fund for this district, similar to what I just said about the Whitewater Urban Services District, sort of there to create the capacity to grow urban services as they become in more demand.
So what is the purpose of just the Mesa County Southwest Rural Community Services PID that has the revenue of $1,150? What are those funds for? Why do they exist, I guess? Why is there a difference?
Yeah, so as I mentioned with the Whitewater Urban Services PID, this was, and Pete can maybe tell me when this public improvement district was created, but the idea is that this is an area of Mesa County that could still see significant growth. There are not many areas where we have room to continue to grow, but this is one of them. There are, as you can see from the revenues and expenditures, not a significant population there, not a lot of property tax payers there, and so the service demand remains relatively low, but the PID here, as I mentioned, supports both the sewer system as well as the operating component. And there really isn't a significant operating component to it right now.
Madam Chair, if I could add a little history, Spencer's exactly right. These were set up in areas when the county got into the sewer business in areas with the anticipation of growth. And as they grow, there'd be a source of revenue to start to provide other rural or urban services such as law enforcement, parks, various other things. So these were set up as a vehicle to collect some revenue as the revenue in those areas grow, and provide an ability to fiscally provide some of those services.
But the Southwest Rural Community Services PID is Gateway, right?
Yes.
So we have a Southwest Rural Community Services PID that's sewer. We have one that's non-sewer. We have a Gateway PID and a Gateway sales tax lid.
Correct. It's a very complicated, and if you wish, so Connie Hahn, I don't believe is here. Oh, she is here. She can come up, but she oversees these. This is a very complex model. The developer asked that some other components be done with the resort down there, but I'll let Connie talk about that.
I remember some of that, but it's just confusing with the names so different, and I just don't understand the different purposes.
I wasn't here. Well, I was here when they were named. I didn't choose the names.
Yeah,
but
we might need to rename them.
Yes.
Go ahead,
We'd like to
Connie.
call them Gateway 1, 2, 3, and 4
Yeah.
if we could, but my understanding by state statute, we had to use a descriptor of where it was in various components there. But
So the Southwest, Connie Hahn, Mesa County Public Works, the Southwest, I'm just going to call it the Southwest.
Okay.
That is just the sewer and the old town of Gateway. The urban service PID is the resort, and there is an agreement that I believe, Janet, when you were here last, between the resort and the Southwest to provide sewer service to the resort. So Southwest is purely the sewer, the plant, the operator, all of that. The Gateway Urban Service is the one, much like the Whitewater one, where we collect a sales tax from anything that, like the resort sells.
So it's called Gateway Sales Tax Lid. That's what you're calling the urban services.
Actually, the lid is inside the urban service PID over here.
the sub,
So here's Southwest, and here's the Gateway.
Well, there's two Southwests here. There's a Southwest sewer and a Southwest PID.
And I think there's two because one is for fees and one is for mill levy.
Okay. And then the Gateway PID.
And the Gateway PID is this urban service PID which encompasses the resort.
And then
It
the
has 14 mills.
Okay.
And then it has a lid inside it that collects sales tax when they sell a shirt or whatever they do there.
Okay. Okay.
And so that mill levy helps, that's that transfer in that Spencer was telling you about, because it collects this mill levy, and we really need it to keep the sewer PID operating at full capacity. So
Okay.
I hope that helps.
We'll talk about changing the names later.
You know, that's an excellent question, and maybe what we ought to do in the future is just put kind of together a stick chart, real simple stick chart showing how all of these interplay with each other, because some of these are going to see activity. That resort's been for sale. One of these days it's going to sell, and anybody who pays that kind of money is going to have different plans of what to do with it. So they'll give use of that. And one other interesting note off Gateway, but down in Whitewater. So that was put in during the boom. It didn't happen, and we got in significant debate of the write-down. We had to write down $3 million, which we should have done a long time ago. But at some point in the future, during your tenure, that's going to be very useful to have had that in place, and you've got a lot of capacity out there.
Yeah.
Just keep the city out of it. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Connie. Any questions on these items? Seeing none, we will adjourn as the Southwest Mesa County Rural Services Public Improvement District and convene as the Mesa County Gateway Public Improvement District.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're almost there. This is the finish line. And thanks again to Connie for providing a really helpful overview of how these PIDs and lids all function as part of a complex web of providing services to some of our outlying communities. So the Gateway Public Improvement District and Local Improvement District, I'll talk about both of those together. 2022 revenues are estimated at $150,000 for those two districts combined. That consists of property taxes in the amount of $87,000, specific ownership taxes for $11,000, and sales tax for $50,000 with $2,000 in other miscellaneous revenue. Expenditures for 2022 are estimated at $43,650, and that's for the operations of those districts, and one component of that scratch that. These are not our sewer districts, so they don't pay into the same person that Pete described who serve our sewer districts. No changes to the mill here. Happy to take any other questions.
Any questions?
No.
Any questions from the audience? Seeing none, we will adjourn as the Mesa County Gateway Public Improvement District. We'll reconvene as the Mesa County Board of County Commissioners, and our last item is unscheduled business. Is there anyone here with any unscheduled business to come before the board? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.